there is a meeting Rammstein in Germany is ongoing. Do you think it will be changed the situation in the battlefield in Ukraine?
I think it will. I think you see that more than 50 allies are coming together with some partners to pledge support for Ukraine. And we have seen the level, both quantitatively but also qualitatively, of Western support for Ukraine continue to grow. And so it is heartening to see that new types of systems that are necessary for the current fight, but also down the road for the battle that continues over the next couple months, will be delivered to Ukraine. Things that they need, things like Stryker armored personnel carriers and Bradley infantry fighting vehicles. These are very important tools that give the Ukrainian military the mobility that they need on the front lines to be able to win this fight.
How do you understand this term, that crucial moment that will be in a few weeks or months, what was predicted by some Western leaders?
Well, look, I mean, Ukraine has been an existential battle for its survival since the beginning of this war on February 24th. So I don't know that there's any more crucial moment than the one that we have been in for the past 11 months. But it is clear from the fight that goes on right now in Bakhmut and Soledar that the fighting is very heavy. There are large casualties on both sides. And Ukraine needs to have the equipment that is necessary to prevail in this type of warfare, trench warfare with often heavy armor on the front lines, at least on the Russian side, where they have an advantage in terms of this sort of heavy mechanized force. And so we need to give Ukraine the means to be able to defend that territory and hopefully also retake it, if not in the coming weeks, then at least in the coming months.
What does expect Biden's administration? I mean, they expect to stop this invasion, at least to defend themselves, or to throw out Russians from the Ukrainian territory?
We want Ukraine to win. We need to see the end result be the liberation of Ukrainian land that is sovereign Ukrainian territory within its internationally recognized borders. Russia has no business being inside Ukraine's territory. The solution is very simple. It's for Russia to leave.
Today, the Netherlands announced that they are ready, probably ready to supply Ukraine with their F-16 fighters. And do you think the Biden administration is ready to take the next step in this context and give approval for the supply of these jets to Ukraine?
Well, we have long held the view that what our allies contribute is their business, and we support the myriad of contributions that our allies have made to Ukraine. And this has been true from the very beginning of the war, when we discussed Soviet legacy systems, to the current period where we're discussing main battle tanks and more sophisticated both air and air defense frames and systems. And so I would expect that there would be broad support in the United States for our allies to continue to step up their contributions.
Even jets?
Even jets.
Okay. And the next my question is about security guarantees. Poland asked NATO to provide to Ukraine guarantees. What do you think, what guarantees actually needs Ukraine? Because I don't understand what actually Poland proposes, and how do you think what Ukraine needs, what guarantees?
Well, clearly when a country is being attacked by a large aggressive power like Russia, it's natural that we would talk about security guarantees and security support. There has been a decision made in Bucharest in 2008, famous decision at the NATO summit, that Ukraine, together with Georgia, will one day become a member of the alliance. Until the political will is there for Ukraine to be a NATO ally, it will be vulnerable to attacks from Russia. And I think a lot of folks who look at the situation currently suspect that even if there were a ceasefire tomorrow, that Russia would use that period to rest and refit, and then would, at some point in the future, would re-attack Ukraine. So we have to collectively, we, the international community, we, the group of like-minded Western states, have to collectively look at what sorts of assurances or support we can give Ukraine until it is politically ready, until the alliance, frankly, is politically ready to admit Ukraine as a member. That period of time may be longer or shorter. I don't know. It's hard for me to predict. But there should be some sort of system in place to give Ukraine security. I don't know if it's guarantees or if it's assurances and equipment and supplies and weapons, but also sanctions as part of a package. This has been discussed between the former NATO Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen and the head of the Ukrainian presidential administration, Andriy Yermak. They have come up with a non-paper. This is how I understand this topic. Of course, it needs to be developed further and discussed in greater detail amongst the allies.
On your opinion, what would be the best guarantee for Ukraine? I mean, maybe it is a NATO membership. That's what Ukrainian authorities say.
Well, again, there has to be some sort of bridging mechanism until the point in time when Ukraine is a NATO member. I can't predict for you what the political will inside the alliance will be like in a year, in 5 years, in 10 years. Maybe NATO membership will come sooner than we anticipate today, sitting here right now. But there should be some sort of mechanism for sanctions and for military support and assistance to Ukraine in the meantime. And so I think that's where the conversation is right now amongst many allies. And I think it's a conversation that needs to continue to develop so that we have a common approach to this position. Of course, developed in consultation with our Ukrainian friends.
If we are talking about security means and role of OSCE in this, so how could you access the role? And maybe if you look back, you can notice some mistakes. What OSCE could make to prevent this conflict, maybe?
Well, at the end of the day, the OSCE is an organization that provides services to the various countries where it has field missions. It did have several missions inside Ukraine, a border mission, it had the special monitoring mission, and it also had the project coordinator in Ukraine that provided support to the Ukrainian government. Russia has vetoed those missions. But, it's not the fault of the OSCE that, think of the OSCE as a house that we have built together. Russia has come in and has burned that house down. It's not the fault of the architects who built the house that someone came in and created arson inside that house. It's the fault of the arsonist. In this case, it's the fault of Russia for being the aggressor. What the OSCE has is tools. And in my view, and I'm representing the United States. I don't speak for the organization. I speak for the United States. In our view, however, we should be very steadfast in using those tools, and we should not allow Russia to veto our ability to help Ukraine. And that's what we've done in the last couple months. We have developed a project called the Support Program for Ukraine, which will now, in the coming weeks, be operationalized on the ground in Ukraine to support Ukraine's needs. Demining, psychosocial support for those affected by the war, support for building capacity to deal with accountability for the various war crimes that have been committed, those sorts of things. We have to support Ukraine with that. And whether Russia decides that they want to veto or not, we should do it anyway. Because, after all, if the United States wants to fund this, if Germany and France want to fund this, if the EU wants to fund it, we should do it. And that's where we've arrived today. That's where we are, is that we're willing to do this despite Russia's veto. We won't allow them to veto this.
Yeah, the organization can't act as it has in such conditions. I mean, Russia, for example, occupied territories, especially. How do you feel what has to be changed in the future, for example, to OSCE will be able to act?
Well, the reality is that the OSCE is an inclusive organization that has Russia, Belarus, and various other countries that are non-democratic within its membership. So it's limited. I mean, NATO serves a purpose. The EU is a normative organization that serves a purpose. The OSCE is a different type of organization. It's not the solution to every problem. And don't forget that the OSCE as an organization really grew up in the 1990s. When the West's relationship with Russia was more cordial, more collaborative. Right now, Russia's violating every single rule of the international system. And by the way, Russia's attacking the OSCE itself. It has requisitioned apparently as many as 70 or more OSCE vehicles from the Special Monitoring Mission, and it's holding 3 of the national staff members of our organization hostage right now as we speak. So what kind of a participating state is that, which holds hostage members of the organization and requisitions or steals, for lack of a better word, the cars that we've paid for as members of this organization? So we should not be content with trying to work with Russia in the current period. Maybe at some point in the future, I don't exclude that. But in the near term, we need to work against Russia and around Russia, working with like-minded states that share our values. And frankly, that's what we're trying to do.
How do you expect to liberate this OSCE staff? I mean, in Donbass, they're hostage now, as you told. So how to liberate them? Maybe it will be under some exchange. I mean, how it is with war prisoners.
Prisoners of war.
Yeah.
I wouldn't exclude it. The Secretariat and our Secretary General are in active talks with the Russian Federation on this. They continue to press the case. They continue to demand the release of these 3 individuals who were bravely working for the organization, which for a mission, which, by the way, not only Russia approved, but Russia was funding. It's really outrageous what the Russians are doing. Of course, the entire war is outrageous. The torture, the mutilation, the rape, the killing of Ukrainians is outrageous. So everything that we're talking about is outrageous. And in these circumstances, this is just another outrage that we have to deal with. But it's not one that we're forgetting about or trying to put off to the side. We continue to raise it all the time with the Russians.
There are discussions that the aggressive state Russia must be expelled from the international organizations. So the head of OSCE doesn't support this idea. How do you feel about that?
Well, to be perfectly honest with you, I am sympathetic with this idea. As I said, Russia cannot, should not be a good standing member of any international organization right now. And frankly, if there were a path to push Russia out of the OSCE, it's a path that I would not oppose. But there is no such mechanism. There is no path to excluding Russia. When the organization was created, as I said, it was in the 90s, in a different geopolitical time, and perhaps some mistakes were made then, but that option does not really exist right now. So what we have chosen to do as participating states within the organization is to isolate Russia and Belarus completely, and we've done that. No other state is supporting them right now. So it's really the 2 against 55. And the 55 are different. You know, there's countries from Central Asia which are still formally CSTO allies with Russia. But at least they're not defending Russia within the organization. And we have a large group of 45 or more, maybe even close to 50 states that are appalled by Russia's war.
Russia has been abducting and deporting children from Ukraine to Russia. What is the U.S. position on this illegal conduct?
Well, this is one of the most disgusting and horrifying things that Russia has done in this war. And there was even a story that was told to me recently of a child that was taken into the Russian Federation that was told by a Russian soldier, "Your mother no longer needs you," to a child who was 11 years old. This behavior is absolutely reprehensible, and the Russian Federation is trying to use the excuse that it is somehow caring for these children and that its actions are humanitarian in nature. Nothing could be further from the truth. It's ripping these children away from their families. And there will have to be a process, a sustained process over many years where the international community helps Ukraine to reunite families with their children. it'll be something like what happened after the dirty war in, say, Argentina, where lots of people were disappeared, many were killed, torn away from their families, and then there was a painstaking process of trying to identify who was missing and whether they could be found afterwards. And it'll be a painstaking process here, but the international community absolutely cannot ignore this problem. And in fact, it needs to start dealing with it now while we still know the names of the children and there are still family members who can come forward and talk about where they might be.
What should the international community do with this, exact maybe acts, how to liberate these children?
The short answer to your question, which is not satisfactory, but the short answer is to enable Ukraine to win this war. The longer answer requires building institutional capacity with Ukraine, with the Ministry of Interior, with other ministries within Ukraine, within the government, to create some sort of registry that will keep track of these children and that will create a process where they can be identified and then returned home to their families.
Russia has been conscripting Ukrainian citizens in occupied areas into their armed forces. What can the USA do to stop this illegal conduct?
Yeah, well, let's be very clear. This is a war crime. Conscripting members of a different country to serve in your armed forces at a time of conflict is a war crime. And this is just another one of the appalling atrocities. You could make a list, from the abduction of children and their deportation to Russia, to conscription involuntarily of Ukrainian citizens, to torture using electrocution, sexual-based violence. I mean, the list is extensive. And what can we do about it? Well, we have to pursue accountability. We have to keep track of every single crime. And I've been told that the Ukrainian Prosecutor General's office has now identified over 60,000 war crimes that have been committed in Ukraine. And we have to keep track of each one, and some of them will get prosecuted by the ICC. Some will be prosecuted, probably the majority, by Ukraine, and others will be prosecuted by other states or jurisdictions based on whether those individuals wind up in their custody one day or not. But we have to be vigilant about this, and we have to pursue accountability.
And also my question about that Russia weaponized food as well as in Syria, in Ukraine also. So what is the USA position on this? How to change this situation?
Well, Russia did weaponize food. Not only did it bomb facilities that were storing grains and food, but then it also blocked ships from being able to exit from their ports in the Sea of Azov and in the Black Sea to deliver those foods to countries around the world where they're needed. And they caused a major rise in the price of various staples, which contributed to hunger in the global south. Extremely, extremely irresponsible. But thankfully, Turkey and the UN stepped in. There is this Black Sea Grain Initiative, which allows for the export of some of Ukraine's grains to the outside world. But make no mistake, this initiative has not stopped Russia from continuing to plunder Ukrainian agricultural goods, as well as many other things, cultural artifacts, by the way, and take them to Russia. So there will have to be accountability for all of this. There will have to be a demand for some sort of reparations based on this looting of Ukraine's property.
And probably the last my question is, what do you think, how the world could make Russia safe for the rest of the world? It's, it's an important issue for all neighbors, all other European countries and all the world. Maybe Russia should be denuclearized or something like that, in your opinion?
Well, we have to look at what is possible. And the reality, of course, is that Russia is one of the largest countries by landmass in the world. The Russian state spans 11 time zones. It's absolutely enormous. So the notion that Russia needs to attack other countries to gain even more territory well, it would be wrong in the first place, even if Russia was minuscule. But in the scale of things, it is truly astonishing. But the Kremlin has an imperialistic mindset, and this mindset has to be put to rest. We cannot continue to cooperate with a country that is so intent on flouting the rules of the international system. And so that's why, we say, of course, Ukraine must win. That's for the sake of our friends in Ukraine. But the flip side is Russia has to endure a strategic defeat. And the reason for that is exactly for the reasons that you've raised, which is that the world cannot live with a country that from one day to the next just decides to use weapons and cross a border and invade its neighbor.
Thank you for the conversation.
You're welcome.